Welcome to everyone as we once again celebrate our wonderful opportunity to have conversations together with the Movement Cafe. The Movement Cafe is an effort of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. We sometimes affectionately call that the movement. And your team today, your Movement Cafe team, is Don Lewis and Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt and myself. So if you need anything, just go ahead and reach out to us as a private message. I want to introduce myself a little, and I'd love to hear about you a little bit. I would love my name is obviously Rashenda. I live in Southern Oregon, and I am a United Methodist Earthkeeper. I work with Oregon Interfaith Power and Light and Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, the Creation Justice Committee, which is big here in Oregon. Obviously, our challenges for resilience include things as widely disparate as forest fires, heat, drought, storms, and a potential devastating earthquake. So, what do? We build strong local communities and neighborhoods, and we love on each other, and we care about each other, and we do what we can together. And that is more important than anything. And it really is about knitting that together. And that's a word that arose from all that work that we're hearing so much more of is called resilience. So we are today going to talk about resilience and resilience hubs. And to kind of talk more about the movement itself, and then also about what are these things called resilience hubs, or what does this even mean? I'm going to turn that over to Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt, who will bring us into some of the big context in that conversation. But please do introduce yourself in the chat because we are those neighbors, arm in arm right now together in this work.
Hi, greetings everyone. I'm Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt, greeting you from Minnesota, where we have a lovely spring day to enjoy. I am a United Methodist layperson, a commissioned Global Ministries Earthkeeper, and one of many leaders who have been helping to bring the creation justice movement to life over the last, I was adding in like the last 5 years. We've actually been doing this for the last 5 years. The United Methodist Church has a really rich tradition of doing work around creation justice, and yet and a lot of great statements and commitments to doing that work, to improving our relationship with God's good creation. But as we've experienced more urgency, as we've around climate change, around environmental injustices, as we've discovered each other at conferences, at Earthkeeper trainings, as all of us have come together, we realized that we could do more, and that there was more that we could do through the United Methodist Church, through this institution that has all of these different parts. And so while it's been 5 years, this isn't really so much a new organization as a continuing effort to connect all the different parts of the United Methodist Church, the many different boards and agencies like Global Ministries, Church and Society, Discipleship Ministries, United Women in Faith, higher education, many annual conferences and local church teams. But it's also, we've developed some work teams to kind of tackle specific parts of this work. And so we have a coordinating team, work teams around worship, advocacy, annual conference organizing, solar, fossil-free divestment, and communications. And it's that communications team that has launched this conversation space called the Movement Cafe, and we're really glad you're here to join us today. Now, the topic for today, as Rashenda was hinting at, gets us into this area of resilience. Now, the United Methodist Church clearly has a long, really proud history of disaster relief and response, working through UMCOR, the United Methodist Committee on Relief. Many local congregations and annual conferences do a lot of important work around disaster relief and response. And so we have this perfect kind of platform of expertise to build on and grow from. This concept of resilience just really expands that idea to go to add elements of resilience and sustainability. And I thought I would start with just giving a working definition. It's something that we're all learning. We're all kind of building the road while we walk it. And so this concept is emerging as folks are beginning to do this work. So the definition that I've seen that we shared in our March newsletter was that resilience hubs are energy efficient, community serving places that have resources and connections that are needed to support community members both in moments of crisis and disruption and in the everyday. And one of the things I found most exciting about this concept is that it's both the opportunity to transition our energy sources and to become more sustainable, things like adding solar, and then that also then makes us more resilient in the midst of a disaster where you then might have a more reliable source of energy. But it's also it can also be about the community elements. Research is showing that one of the key elements of resilience is social cohesion, is that network of relationships that we have within our faith communities and out into our communities. And that it in itself is creating a type of resilience that's really going to be important for us as we walk through disruptive times. And it seems like a particularly exciting and important role for our churches to play. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to others who are walking through and learning how to do this work. But I do commend to you our March newsletter that focused on this topic and a list of resources that we compiled for that, and I'll plop those in the chat. In the meantime, thanks for being here, and I'm going to turn it right back to Rashinda.
All right, thank you so much. And I want to give, as we were introducing people, I want to give a quick shout out to Tom Stagel, who is actually joining us from the solar trailer. So, Tom, unmute to say hello so it'll focus on you and give us a wave. If you can't, there you
Hello, I'm
go.
Tom Stagel.
So you're going to get to hear more from him in a breakout room, and he and Scott Parrish, of course, are working together to bring that kind of relief and excitement. So I'm excited. I got to see the solar trailer at General Conference, and the work that's gone into that and around that is just stunning. And I believe Jenny Phillips is with us today too, and she has put tremendous effort in this well. So just, like I say, we are arm in arm with neighbors here who are doing absolutely marvelous work. Okay, so I want to share a little bit of a clip. So as I said, I connected with the Oregon work, the Oregon's Resilience Hubs. We've been working at Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon and Oregon Interfaith Power and Light to develop resilience hubs and faith-based hubs across the state. And our last summit was broadcast to, I think, 18 different faith congregations around Oregon as we gathered, and what we focused on was resilience. Oregon we're so lucky here. We have a recognition of that this work has to be done even in our state. So Oregon has a chief resilience officer, just amazing and marvelous. And Jonna, I'm going to pop her LinkedIn in the chat in just a minute. But Jonna Papathemiou is the Chief Resilience Officer. She was one of the speakers at this event, the summit that we held, and she describes what a resilience hub so a shelter. When we will recognize in her words our own experiences trying to do this work as we start the questions of how can we do this better. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share
Jonna Papathemiou, who is the State Resilience Officer advising Oregon Governor Tina Kotek on emergency management and disaster resilience. Welcome, Jonna.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon. As Peter said, my name is Jonna Papathemiou, and I am your Oregon State Resilience Officer. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be invited to speak to you today about the state of Oregon's climate resilience. To illustrate our situation, I would like to start by sharing an experience I had a few years ago. It was a Sunday, June 28th, 2021, and it was 112 degrees in Portland, Oregon. I was the interim director of the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management at that time. And so although it was Sunday, I was working. I was checking in with homeless service providers on their outreach efforts. I was calling around to warehouse stores to try and buy more pallets of water anywhere I could find it. And I was problem solving on staffing for the emergency cooling shelters. But by 8 o'clock, we were still really understaffed at the Oregon Convention Center, with more than 500 people there now seeking refuge from the heat. So when I got off my last call, I got in the car and I drove over to the convention center to work a night shift. And I called my friend Anne, and she agreed to meet me there and take a shift too. When Anne and I walked in the doors, the convention center had been transformed into something resembling a news story about a disaster in a faraway place. There were hundreds and hundreds of cots set out in rows. There was a station with food and cold water and a first aid table where dozens of people were waiting to talk to a medical volunteer. I signed in and I did a briefing with the other volunteers. And people raised their hands for tasks: registration, food station, bathroom monitor. I assigned myself a floater and started walking up and down the aisles in the shelter. I saw a mom with a newborn and a toddler. She pushed 2 cots together and she was nursing her baby with a blanket over her head. I saw seniors laying on thin cots with their wheelchairs parked next to them. One woman asked me when she would be allowed to go home, and I realized that she wasn't quite sure how she got there. I saw a lot of homeless folks resting and talking. There were people impaired by drugs and alcohol. There was a person talking very loudly to themselves. And there was a man moaning in pain, but he wouldn't talk to anyone else. People kept arriving all through the night shift. We gave them a cot and handed out light blankets, all very distressingly stenciled LA County Jail, because that's what the Red Cross had available for free that day. At midnight, there was an overdose in the bathroom, and we administered naloxone, and someone called 911, but I don't think anyone ever came because medical services were completely overwhelmed that day. Near morning, the person who was moaning asked for an ambulance, and thank God it came that time. They were loaded onto a stretcher and transported while the other guests looked on with concern. As people started to wake up, 2 men with mobility impairments got into a very noisy argument over the last loaner wheelchair because we didn't have enough wheelchairs and they both needed it to get to the bathroom. That fight definitely distressed the guests around them, and someone just started to howl out loud, and then a child started to cry. When I saw 2 seniors fighting over a wheelchair, I thought, okay, this is hell. And then someone found another wheelchair we could use. So both guests got one and they could go use the facilities. And then someone, perhaps an actual saint, showed up with the biggest McDonald's order ever and just started out handing Egg McMuffins. I'm not a big fast food person, but Egg McMuffins all around was pretty amazing on that morning. People started waking up and they asked what time the shelter would close, because usually shelters close during the day and people have to pack up and leave. But we were able to say that the shelter was going to be open all the time until the weather cooled off. And the guests were happy to hear that. And then the day started and someone got a hold of Human Services and they agreed to put the mom with the 2 little ones in a hotel for the night. Later, we learned that more than 96 people died of the heat in Oregon during that stretch of hot weather. Almost everyone who passed away was alone. But in the shelter, nobody was alone. And nobody passed away. And there was unlimited cold water and ugly blankets and hot food. It was hardly heaven, but it turned out it wasn't hell either.
That story moved those of us who were at the hub in Medford, where I was, and many that attended. And I think that as people of faith who do this work, we all recognize that story, right? We've all been near that story or been a volunteer at a shelter and know the challenges of resources and all the rest. And so I wanted to kind of start us off with some testimony of what that feels like, and then move us into our next parts of our cafe today. So I want to introduce Scott Parrish, who is in North Georgia. He is a deacon in the North Georgia Conference and has served many years in congregational ministry, as well as serving in connectional ministries on staff since 2014. His focus is mission and disaster response. He's He's also a hobby farmer in his spare time and was in the first class of UMC Earthkeepers. He has lived in Augusta, Georgia since 1994, and his work in coordination with UMCOR leading conference disaster response has been close to home since Hurricane Helene plowed through the Southeast. And with that, I turn it over to Scott.
Thank you. Hey, friends, hope I don't need a Southern translator. I know quite a few of you. Glad to be with you today. If you watch the Masters, we had this little golf tournament last week. Maybe you caught some of that. And maybe that gives you some context for the impact of this hurricane that was incredibly unlikely to hit our area. But of course, in this time of climate chaos, some of us now can imagine the worst case scenario. And so that's some of what we experienced. I'll share with you for a few minutes. Now, I've laughed about this, Rashinda and Kathy and others. We're not very advanced in terms of resilience hub type thinking. Many of you have many years in this type of work. And so I would say that historically, we would be an area that would send teams to some of you around the Southeast and around the US. But now we're having to stand up our own operations. Now, sometimes when I think of resilience, I think we're at that intersection of community resilience, creation resilience, and disaster resilience. And so that's some of the way that I think about this and think about this in some experimental ways as we begin to learn and grow. Here's Augusta. By the time Helene hit us, it was 3, 4, 5 a.m. that Friday morning. And we were having 80 to 90 mile an hour winds sustained with 100 mile an hour gust that were hitting Augusta. And those knocked out the National Weather Service Center right there. So it ripped through our area in a way that we had never experienced. To put this in context, Augusta, Richmond County, the second largest metropolitan area in Georgia, does not have an EMA director. We didn't on the day of the hurricane impact, and we still don't have an EMA director. So sometimes when I think about resilience, some of what we're testing out is our preparation, our ability to respond, our sense of vulnerable populations, and then some of that awareness of our assets. And among those assets, that's where I think of our abilities with creation care sensibility. If you can see my resilience hub modes, some of what we can do is be resilient every day. Some of that is resilience and disruption. And then some of where we're experimenting now is resilience in recovery. Now we're beginners with this. So some of what I'll be leaning into and what Tom and I will talk about if you join our breakout session will be the fact that we're learning and we're very experimental. We're not just in one location, though I live outside of Augusta. We cover half the state and now almost the entire state in some of our response. So some of the ways to think about resilience is in terms of programming, it's structure. It's some of what we'll talk more about in the breakout with resilient power, and also resilient communications, and then this other element of operations. And honestly, that's a lot of my background and experience with UMCOR, and that sort of network that really leans into programming and services, and then resilient operations, and how we do that well and how we serve at a community level, but then beyond community in this larger network. So a lot of this creates opportunity to wear more than one t-shirt. So a lot of my background has been with mission, it's been with disaster response, it's with creation care, and some sensibility of new and better practices. Much of our area is high vulnerability, high poverty, high percentage of elderly and medically vulnerable. And so all of those things come into play when we think about resilience. And that also affects us as we think about what it means to be a resilience hub. And so again, I've laughed, like, I think some of what Tom and I are doing and some of our larger team, we're not quite to the point of resilience hubs. It's more like a resilience laboratory or a node or an experiment. But as we lean into this, we learn more. We can learn and adapt. We can also test out some locations, some places that could be hubs, right? With a few steps, a few practices, more networking, like with this group and with others, with networking with our partners like Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and with UMCOR. We can begin to test out places that do have a heart for the community and can lean into more earthkeeper sensibilities about resilience that can hold up for the long term. So I think of this all as possible steps toward resilience hubs. So where Shawn will be able to talk about a 20-year record and growth and nurturing, this is a little more like my garden outside, that some of it's very experimental about what may grow, what needs care and attention, and then what doesn't work. With the solar power trailer, this gives us a mobile approach to resilience building and testing out where resilience hubs might be established. It allows us to find partners, some who are drawn to this sort of work, some who are available to partnering at the community level. We found in a lot of our work, though some of you have been at this work for 20 or 30 years, like for the typical early response team, there can be a lot of preference for fossil fuel generators, for things that they've done for 20 years themselves, and it can be slower and a little tougher to lean into the solar trailer. So that's where we have some fun with experimenting and adapting, taking folks along for the ride, maybe offering some first experiences, whether it's at a school or a conference or a special event, featuring visits to the trailer to show off some of its capability. We've been able to deploy in a number of different situations that kind of challenge us. And so I think that's another piece of this experimental leaning into resilience nodes or laboratories, putting it into play after a fire, after a tornado, after hurricanes. With the hurricanes, sometimes that looks like a flood event, and other times that looks like what Augusta had with 75% of tree loss and trees down. So we'll have more opportunity if you want to talk tech or have more questions during our session. of the breakout, and Tom will be out there at the trailer. Rashinda, I don't know if I nailed my timing, if I'm close to that, or if Tom needed to say something at this point.
Tom, you have just a minute if you did want to say something, but you nailed timing, Scott. That was awesome. Go ahead.
No, I look forward to anybody who wants to spend some time in the breakout. We have some pretty good experiences in our first several deployments. I'd love to share them with you and learn maybe from some.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, so as we sort of tell the story of resilience hubs, we talk about the story from Jonna about what it was like in a heat shelter where 96 people died in Portland, Oregon that year. We talk about what the messy middle suddenly rises up as Scott Parrish, who's in North Georgia, who it's a climate haven, right? Except until it's not. And then the question of that messy middle, how do we move? So I want to introduce Shawn Anglim, and Shawn is going to bring this whole like when you start attending to that work as you build out from the messy middle, what can it start to look like, and how can it start to really be part of the fabric of how people are neighbors together? Shawn Anglim is the pastor at the FirstGrace United Methodist Church and is a founding member of Community Lighthouse, which we'll learn more about. It's a project spearheaded by Together New Orleans, a solar-equipped resilience hub network of faith communities and others in Louisiana. FirstGrace UMC was born out of a merger of a historical Black church and a historical white church in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. And during his leadership in the church, other projects Shawn has led or developed are the FirstGrace Community Alliance and its missions, the Hager House, a residence for women, trans women, and children without a home, and Project Ishmael, which is a free legal clinic for immigrant children. Once we start building out that understanding of what resilience means, it really grows into the kind of community we all dream of. So go ahead, Shawn. So glad you're here.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm sitting in the church right now, FirstGrace, and I've asked just to share just a little bit about how FirstGrace came into being, and then how the Community Lighthouse came into being. And when you talk about these things, it all sounds so orderly and planned. And I just want to affirm that we're just people like everybody else, and just trying to be faithful and having good days and bad days and good weeks and bad months and the whole 9 yards. But my spiritual experience, I think, in ministry is that we get these moments, and we half the time we don't even recognize that we got a moment, and we get moments we don't ask for, and then like the Spirit just trusts us with them. What are you going to do with this? So there was Hurricane Katrina. My wife and our 3-year-old and my very pregnant wife and our 3-year-old came here after the storm, and we had 8 churches. 2 of them didn't exist. They were literally gone, the buildings. And through a series of mysterious events, I ended up being closely connected to 2 of them. Grace, which was a historical Black church, there were about 24 members left. And First, which was a historical white church, had about 17 people. And of that leadership, my first meeting was with a 95-year-old man, a 90-year-old woman, a 90-year-old woman, an 86-year-old woman, and a young man like me who was 60. And you kind of wonder what's the future. There had been a charter school in that building. That's how they paid the bills. Of course, the building had 5 or 6 or 7 feet of water. But what became clear to me that these 2 churches were a mile apart, and we all know why they were a mile apart. And is it possible to find a way to give people the opportunity to be faithful? That's what we get to do in ministry. How do we honor people who have been so faithful with the opportunity to be faithful? And we get these moments, and my sense was the moment was to invite them to become a new body, and we would come together as one body. And so I went on a retreat and came back. I just asked the Spirit to give me a question. This rarely happens to me, but I actually got a question. I couldn't believe it. And I came back with this question. Do you think we can do more for our city in this moment as one body of Christ? More than we could ever do as two, 1 long mile apart. And 6 months later, FirstGrace emerged. And, before the pandemic, we were about 250, 260. Now we're back up to 200. We're not a giant church, but we're healthy in that number wise, and we have a big building. And, we think of ourselves as being a hub of urban life where we've created a worship experience that people can have a common experience that cross many boundaries, race and ethnicity and et cetera. And gospel music helps a whole lot with that. Then Hurricane Ida hit about 2.5 years ago. And that was a real moment. For some reason, all the hurricanes, that was a moment. We lost power for 2 weeks. 26, 27, 28 people died from heat exhaustion. The church lost one side of its sanctuary roof. And, we had a very powerful community organization called Together New Orleans, and we have a tremendous leader. I invite you to write his name down, Broad Baggart Jr., who is just a force of nature and very politically savvy. And he got us together like he always does. And somebody in a Zoom call like this said, I don't know, like are we going to keep depending on electrical lines held up by pixie sticks when we're in Hurricane Alley to be the way we power ourselves? And then somebody said, yeah, we ought to put solar panels and get some batteries on churches and community centers. And, it was so far-fetched, but not for Broad Baggart. And we put a proposal together and we went to the Greater New Orleans Foundation and asked them for $1 million. And they gave us $1 million. And we put in Laplace, there was a church. Laplace is a town about 35 miles from New Orleans. It was a Black church, and they had very strong disaster relief. And we put like a $600,000 community lighthouse on that building, solar powered it with Tesla battery backups. And then we asked Troy Carter, our representative, to work with us, and he got us $3.8 million in the federal budget. This was in the previous administration. And then the city we had a big rally, over 1,000 people. And on the spot, the mayor, slapped a promise for $1 million. And then she slapped down another $1 million. She was so moved by the whole thing. And pretty soon we were rolling. We now have 9 community lighthouses in New Orleans. These are churches, nonprofits. We have a community health center, Crescent Healthcare, who lost about $300,000 in prescription drug medicines in Hurricane Ida. They now have solar power with battery backup. My church has solar power with battery backup. Not the whole church, our fellowship hall and our second floor where the women and children vacate from Hagar's house when the storm hits. And we got a little test run with Hurricane Ida. And, I think of FirstGrace as a wilderness church. We walked out of Egypt. We celebrated 3 days later, just like in the gospel, or just like in Exodus, everybody said, why did we leave Egypt? We should have stayed in Egypt. We had all the jobs we wanted. We had all the food. Everything was grand. That's just the human experience. We rewrite our history as happening right now. But, we just you got to keep walking into the wilderness and keep inviting people to be faithful. It's not that everybody goes, but if enough people go, everybody wins, even the people who didn't go. Everything, it blesses everybody. And that's what we've kept doing. Community Lighthouse, I want to show you a 1-minute video, but I want to say it's more than about the way we've thought about it. It's not just about getting solar panel and battery backup. We thought about who does the work. And we have made it a point to hire a unionized Black-owned electrical company to do the wiring. We have united with the company, you know, is a small business, Solar Alternatives, but we've connected them with Green Corps, which is an AmeriCorps program that trains a lot of young people who didn't make it through high school or were incarcerated for a short time on green jobs. And so they've had these young people working with them, and some of them have now been hired by Solar Alternatives. So we've just been very conscious about workforce development. The unions, the electrical union, the Brotherhood of Unions is now a member of Together New Orleans. And we've, you know, so we've just been very thoughtful in that way. And lo and behold, we had a hurricane, of course, Hurricane Francine, just a small one. We lost power for about 2 days. Of what happened at FirstGrace with Hurricane Francine. And what I want to say to introduce this is what we discovered is that a lot of organic things can happen if they have a place to happen organically. So because we were a community lighthouse, the city called us, called the church, and said, can we distribute oxygen tanks out of FirstGrace? The Salvation Army called us, can we set up our food truck there? Because you have power. The food bank called, can we distribute our food there? Because you have power. Smaller footprint that has electric generators for people who have medical devices and need power. Can we distribute them out of FirstGrace because you have power? And then, of course, people ran out of power. People didn't have air conditioning. So people started showing up with their children, with their phones, with their own medical devices and powering them up. And this is a 1-minute glimpse of what it looked like by the afternoon of losing power. So since I think that event, we met this morning here at FirstGrace with the organization out of DC that just started 7 months ago. They have come to New Orleans to see Community Lighthouse because they're trying to scale it up nationally in some way. And it works. And it's spreading across the state of Louisiana now. There's going to be community lighthouses in Baton Rouge and in Shreveport. The city of Houston is taking a very hard look at it, and it looks like something's going to happen there. Houston lost power because of a freeze. Hundreds of people died because of that. And so it's generating, tremendous interest because it's doable. And where we are now, what we're realizing is the more community lighthouses we have, the more battery backup you have. And that begins to get people thinking about where do we get our power from, especially on very hot days. Are we going to turn on another power plant? Or now there's software where you can take like 10 to 15% of the power from batteries all over the city and meet the demand that has now kicked in, because of tremendous heat. And so it's just generated all kinds of conversations. We're having conversations with putting in charging stations in our parking lot. There's no charging stations in Mid-City in New Orleans. We're in the Mid-City area on Canal Street. And this would never happen with FirstGrace. It would happen with Together New Orleans. And I would say about 2/3 of the churches are predominantly Black congregations. But we are now affecting our city. We have changed energy policy because we have a unique energy policy in New Orleans. Our city council has sole regulatory authority. We look like we're going to get 32 million out of the utility company to put in more community lighthouses across our city. And it's reminded us of what is possible. The last thing I would say is one of our interesting conversations is the nation of New Zealand has been uninsurable since like the 1940s, because we have issues with insurance, obviously, like many people. And what we found is New Zealand is self-insured. So everybody pays into a national insurance program. And they have earthquakes. So they had an earthquake, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. Everybody's covered for the first $300,000. Now, New Zealand has a gross domestic product of 2.5 billion. Louisiana has a gross domestic product of 4.5 billion. So why can't we do that? Well, because maybe nobody wants to try that. But the more the pressure mounts on people can't afford their insurance, the more people are willing to try new ways of doing things and to walk into that wilderness. So I'm just grateful to be on the journey with you all as we all try to walk into this wilderness. And I just want to say, I hope I never get to the promised land. The wilderness is the place to be because you have to look people in the eye and you have to figure it out. And it's not always the best of days, but it's just where you feel most alive on most days. So thank you for having me. It's great to be with everyone.
Oh, thank you, Shawn. There's so many like little things you said that I just kind of want to pull out. I love this, that things can't happen organically unless there's a place for them to organically happen, which I think that's so wise. Like just in terms of like gardening, right? If you don't have a garden, you're not going to have organic growth. And so the ways that we think about this, I just want to acknowledge too, just for a minute, we have folks on this call are just so engaged. As I'm looking at who's here, I'm just kind of blown away. We have so many resilience coordinators, disaster coordinators here, like Dan Wilcox and Louise Kinzel. We have a caretaker of God's creation here, like Joan Pell and Patty Sloan, and so many others. We have Angela Overstreet here from UMCOR. We have Jenny Phillips here from Global Ministries. You're here too, and I can't mention everybody's name because of how it's just this work has amplified. Talk about an organic place where organic things have happened. This work has amplified, and all of you are why, and all of you are doing this amazing work. And I wish I could just pass out like grants, like Egg McMuffins from our first video. But I'm sure we're going to have that opportunity together to build this work, build the funding for this work, and build the energy for the work as we continue. I want to next invite Cara. Sorry, I muted myself there again. Cara Fleischer is the chair of the Creation and Care Task Team in the Florida Conference and started and leads the Creation Care Ministry at her home church of St. Paul's UMC in Tallahassee. She's an earth keeper, an eco communications consultant for Rethink Energy Florida, a nature writer, and an elected soil and water conservation district supervisor. That's right. As we learned a couple of cafes ago, you can run for office. You can run for like those little commission boards and make a difference there too. She's recently developed a program engaging the bishop and conference staff to promote funding and resilience in her conference. And I'm going to turn it over to Cara now. So go ahead, Cara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And Shawn, just before I begin, I just want to let you know that your story is the model that we've been waiting for. So thank you. And I truly am so inspired to see it working in a city like New Orleans. And I truly hope that we can try to learn more about it and implement this in some of our cities in Florida. So thank you so much for that. I am Cara Fleischer. I live in Tallahassee. I have been involved with creation care for 10 years, starting the church garden and the team at my home church, and then getting involved with the task team of the Florida conference. And since then it's been an amazing journey. I've been the chair. I'm now the co-chair. And, we have really seen, unfortunately, the change just in 10 years in Florida, going from a hurricane now and then to every single season having absolutely record-breaking, devastating, community wiping, death-bringing torture, to put it mildly. And it's all happening so fast. And the reason why we're feeling it so strongly is because of course, the warming planet and all of that energy getting put into the oceans. And our Gulf is overcharged, overheated. They just yesterday came out with the temperature readings of the Gulf, and it is off the charts, record-breaking heat already. So we are learning, living next to this very warm body of water, that this means that we are seeing stronger storms that go from a Category 1 to a Category 5. We had tornadoes associated with our hurricanes last year for the first time ever, all across the state, not just on the coast, all over the state. So we are living in a new reality, truly. We are feeling it. We are ground zero here in Florida. And sadly, this shouldn't be news because the scientists have been telling us this for a very long time, but it's actually here. So just wanted to give a shout out to Trish Warren. She's our disaster recovery leader here in Florida, and she's working really hard to help churches clean up after these disasters. We have churches who near me up here in the Panhandle in Cedar Key and Steenahatchee, they've been completely flooded 2 years in a row. Their churches and also, all of their members. These are hardships that just continue on. And now we are literally looking down the barrel of another hurricane season starting in June. So Trish also, they work to provide training for the local church. Our task team has been focusing on equipping the local church for creation care ministry for 10 years. And that has been joyous. We've done gardens, we're doing sustainability, we're doing nature hikes. But after this last season, our team, honestly, and me too, we were just traumatized because storm after storm was coming. We were evacuating. We were not knowing if our homes were going to exist. I mean, I remember being in Atlanta just bawling because Jim Cantori was in Tallahassee for 3 days saying, this place is done. We have so many oak trees here, the high winds. So we're living through a lot of eco anxiety as well as the actual devastation and the cleanup. So I was shook, and we were going to launch a conference ride initiative on being plastic and foam free, green events. And literally the Holy Spirit just was so heavy on me to say, we have got to look at the elephant in the room here, this huge, huge situation that's happening to all of us, and to help connect the dots between how our churches are using energy and how we are dealing with disaster recovery and these extreme storms. And so through that, I put on my communications hat and we came up with a project, a big campaign called Buckets of Hope. And this is a project that is attempting to excite churches to create flood buckets, which most people know what those are. They're buckets that have all the cleaning supplies for, people who've gone through storms and flooding. And we used 5,000 of those buckets in Florida just for one storm. And we had to go out of state to get them because we ran out. And so the idea is to get churches to be resilient by creating these buckets, keeping them in their own churches or in their own districts. So when disaster strikes, they could easily be distributed to who they need to go to. So, but we didn't stop there. We made it a challenge. So churches set their own goals. And then when they reach their goals, they get to bucket their leader, their pastor, their youth director, almost like the ice bucket challenge that was before in the past that was so successful. But this time they get to dress up like a weatherman or a weatherwoman in their rain gear and they get bucketed. And this is going to be a chance to capture that fun moment on video and share it on social media once they reach their goal at their local church. And then if we reach our conference goal of 5,000 buckets, we get to bucket the bishop at annual conference. And he has agreed to this. So that's kind of the driver, the fun piece. Along with this, though, comes webinars, monthly webinars on all kinds of topics that we think are really important, including creation care, green team formation, sustainable churches, bringing in experts to really look at eco-anxiety, and also climate justice and how the least of these are meaning the people without means, without abilities to prepare for hurricanes, to evacuate from hurricanes, and to recover from hurricanes. They are being hurt the worst, even though they are the ones who are contributing the least in carbon emissions. So these messages, connecting the dots through all of these things, is what this program is trying to accomplish. So I will just share screen to show you quickly what our materials are looking like. And, this is something that could be duplicated. I'm clicking present. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we are the Buckets of Hope. And what's been great about this is so many of our conference leaders have said, Cara, we need Buckets of Hope. Tell me about this Buckets of Hope thing. And they have been so supportive because we're all feeling the heaviness from so many things going on in our country right now. But this is something that brings everybody together. So, we're going there. We're talking about why this is happening. It's because we have warmer temperatures. We're not shying away from the science of it, but we're going to get a famous meteorologist in Miami to do a webinar for us to give the facts, to give the truth of why this is worse. I mean, we had, storm surge, 16 feet. We had 249 lives were lost with Hurricane Helene, $78 billion in damage. And these things are just, the real deal with this is you don't know how many you're going to get in one season. And then the season starts again in 9 months. So, so many resources we're putting into this. And we still have a chance to reduce our carbon footprint so it doesn't continue to spiral to the worst case scenario, right? And that's where the churches come in. Like, we use energy, we use a lot of energy, we make a lot of trash. We can make a difference in, what we do. So this is one of the, flyers that we created. So number 1, they pledge to make flood buckets. 2, they get educated. 3, they learn about sustainability and start creation care. And then 4, we're going to spread the word by bucketing our leaders, videoing that, and sharing that with the community. You know, we're out of buckets, so we have a real need to create these buckets and to keep them in our churches and our districts so they can be distributed quickly. We've been, you know, John Wesley's do no harm. Right now, our churches are doing harm. When you look at our carbon footprints and you look at the trash that we create, we can be part of making this better once we know better and once we do better. And this is in the social principles. This is not something that we're making up. And, you know, this group, of course, is very wonderful for me to point to and say, hey, we have a national group. This is happening all over the country. This isn't just, you know, an ask that we're doing for Florida. I already talked about that. So here is how we're the nuts and bolts of it. There's different church categories depending on the size of your church. And each category is going to have a mini competition. So whoever makes the most within their category gets to be part of the bucketing the bishop team. But all churches that enter are going to or participate are going to be entered into a prize, because we also want to get 50% of churches. So we really want to have videos that say, we took the Buckets of Hope Challenge. Here's Jim Cantori down at the bottom with his weather gear on. And so we're trying to make it fun in light of the fact that these can be very heavy topics and heavy reasons. This is also a challenge we're going to do at annual conference at our pop-up party. It's two groups that have a contest, and they pass the bucket of water back to see who ends up with the most water at the end. So we're making this fun. The cabinet is going to be on one side and youth and college kids on the other. We're going to see who wins. So again, this is just trying to bring some fun and awareness to this. We are going to have the solar trailer at our annual conference. This is the one in Georgia, but we're going to have our Florida one. And then we really are going into what is creation care. And this is different than just making buckets, right? This is saying we are called to be good stewards of God's earth. And, you know, this is a dynamic and fun and meaningful ministry that, you know, all churches should have. So we're very excited that this is tying this important project to creation care and spreading the information about it, and hopefully, you know, increase the number of ministries that we're going to have across our conference. You know, we're just teaching sustainable practices at churches, and we don't want to scare people off by thinking they all have to go solar, right? Like, you can start with little cards next to light switches that say, please turn off the lights when you leave the room. Like, there are things that we can do, and a lot of it is starting with education. So yeah, that's our challenge. And we have a registration form, and all of these materials are at our website, which is the FLUMC website, Buckets of Hope Challenge. Welcome you to check those out, and you know, just let me know if there's any questions that you have about it.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Cara. So yeah, moving through that sort of, how do we manage this? It's kind of chaos to having that sort of awareness that, hey, we didn't think this was something we needed to gear up for, but we do. To how to bring communities together across previous lines that have actually interrupted our ability to care for each other and our neighbors and respond to the work. And then what are some fun ways that help build our hope in our hearts, ways that include our church to do that? I want to invite Jenny Phillips to share a little bit as well. We have a couple of minutes, and I really love for you to hear from her. Dawn, she needs to be a co-host, if you can do that. And go ahead. So Jenny Phillips is the sustainability officer through Global Ministries. I've botched your title, Jenny, so you're going to have to clarify that. Oh, good. So I'll just turn it right over to you. Okay, good.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jenny Phillips. I lead the sustainability programming at Global Ministries and UMCOR, and am an elder from the Pacific Northwest Conference. And just tagging on to all the exciting stories that we've already heard, I wanted to share briefly about a new initiative geared toward conference disaster response coordinators, but with opportunity for other folks in the conference. Heard Scott mention that that it can be challenging to take on a solar trailer, and people need some exposure to think about what, if and how they want to get involved in putting renewable energy into their disaster response. At UMCOR, we've heard that message loud and clear, and we really want people to get some exposure to renewable energy equipment before making decisions about how to use them. And so we've just launched a sustainable response technology library, and I'm going to share my screen here just to show you a few pictures. And this is a resource where conference disaster response coordinators or someone designated by the conference disaster response coordinator can go through an online training and then check out equipment. Checking it out means you place an order and have the equipment shipped to your location. You prearrange how long you expect to need it and then send it back so someone else can use it. The equipment is stored, most of it is going to be stored in New Orleans with Footprint Project, who's worked with both Shawn and with the North Georgia Conference. And so basically the program includes training. I'm going to click my slides here real quick. And so we have an online course. If you've done the Global Ministries Earthkeepers training in recent years, you've already used the Teachable platform. So our online course to learn about portable solar and portable water generation is available on that same platform. And then people get the chance to play with the equipment and use it. We actually recommend that before a conference needs it for disaster, they check it out so that they can set it up to use it, maybe an annual conference event for a demo, a community event, so that they can practice using the equipment before it's time to use it in the face of an emergency. These are the different pieces of equipment we have: 3 sizes of solar generator, a couple of atmospheric water generators, which generate water out of the humidity in the air, and then solar panels and racking. And then the program also, you're required to go through safety training as part of that online training, which we think is so important to make sure that anyone who's using the equipment knows exactly how to use it safely and effectively. So if this interests you and you're a CDRC, reach out. If you are not a CDRC, a Conference Disaster Response Coordinator, talk to your CDRCs. Again, right now, the only people who can check out equipment are Conference Disaster Response Coordinators or someone that they designate to check out equipment on behalf of the conference. So if this interests you, talk to your Conference Disaster Response Coordinator. And Marty, I see your quote. I can give you the link for the classroom. Anyone can take the course, but again, you can only check out equipment through your Conference Disaster Response Coordinator. All right, I'll put it in the chat in just a minute as soon as I get back to the link. That's all I have, Rashenda. Thanks for giving me a moment.
That's wonderful. I think that might help break some ice in terms of having a chance to look and touch. What is it? Doubting Thomas. He gets a bad rap. I like to touch something and have a sense of I know how to use it, and I'm not just going to be causing more trouble, right? Get behind, the stumbling block. Let's see how many small little biblical references I can fit into this last moment here. So thank you so much, Jenny. We're actually moving now into our time for breakouts. We have 4 breakout rooms. And again, it's a choose the room you would like. Our presenters, our 3 presenters have all agreed to host a breakout room where you get a chance to just talk together. Cara from Florida Conference, Shawn from Louisiana Conference, and Scott and Tom will co-host a room. Scott from North Georgia, and Tom from the Solar Trailer. And Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt will also be available in a room if you want to talk more, sort of some of the Methodist connections, some of more of what resilience hubs are. All of those rooms are available to you. Don, have you launched the rooms yet? Perfect.
Just
So you
did.
get to choose if you have any challenge. Some people have challenges choosing a room. Just let one of the hosts know. We'll be glad to just pop you in a room. And then after our conversations in the breakout rooms, we're going to come back here for just a couple minutes where we pop links in the chat, any last things, and a prayer together, which is, of course, so important for holding our space and worship together. And here we go. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, as we come back from our breakout rooms, which I know must have been very good because, as usual, it is the very last second that everybody comes back to our shared space together. And I also want to invite someone. I think we'd have like just a couple minutes, so it's not a long time, but to reflect on something that happened in the breakout room that you'd like to share.
Well, I'll
Okay,
jump
go
in.
ahead.
Mary Beth and I had a lovely conversation, and one of the things I mentioned is that there's a book out called Refugee of Faith. It's linked in as one of the resources in that list of resources that gets at more of the theological concept of this. I think it's important that we do the practical coordinating of how all of this works on the ground, but that book has served as a really nice way of looking at how we create those spaces that are where life can thrive, where community can thrive in the midst of destruction and disruption, and that those then serve as a source of new life to grow, and that churches seem like such a perfect model for those kind of spaces. So just lift that up as a possible resource, as well as that list of resources and newsletter for further exploration.
But yes, underpinning this is this theological call on us as people of faith, right? And we have these beautiful faith communities, and some are struggling, some are small, some are large, some have great music, some, well, gosh, we all enjoy singing together, even if the music isn't everywhere we'd like it to be. That this is just about being in community together. Okay, so it's been really absolutely wonderful conversation. I really want to thank Reverend Shawn Anglim for helping us see the possibility of the story of building a real network, being part of something community-wide that actually is very soul-filling and moves us to work. I want to thank Cara Fleischer for being here from Florida, and of course, the challenges that being in Florida, we all know just from hearing Florida Conference, the kinds of things that they're dealing with, and our gratitude for her work in everything that she does, and also for Trish Warren, who was here as well, who is in the midst of that work and really, really grateful for what she does. Thank you to Scott Parrish and Tom Stagel for being in the midst of it and sharing that messy middle, sharing the joy of the things that you hope you can do, as well as the like, my goodness, how do we sort this out? And thank you to Jenny too for sharing that library. I think that's really going to come in handy. People are really going to appreciate that. And when you start asking for grants, you can be so specific. You know, I've worked with this item. I know what I'm asking for. Please give us your, what was it, $1 million, Shawn, that you mentioned. Think big, ask big. These things cost money, and we can really move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Dawn to pray us out. And thank you all so much for being here and sharing this time with us all together.
Thank you, Rashenda. Okay, everyone, let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing this group together and for the expertise, inspiration, and resources our presenters shared with us today. We thank you for the vision and the call to create resilience hubs within our Methodist churches. We ask for your guidance as we establish these vital spaces where our communities can find strength and support in the face of adversity. Help us to discern what is truly needed and equip us with the resources and wisdom to provide a safe and welcoming environment for all. Grant us the courage to serve with love and compassion, to minister to the needs of those who are hurting, and to offer a beacon of hope in times of crisis. Bless these resilience hubs as they continue to be places of healing, connection, and community. We ask for all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. And I hope everyone has a joyous Easter. Thank you so much for coming.
That's right. Holy Week is here.
Thank you. Great job, everyone.
Thank you. Blessings all.